Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Here's a look at what's lined up for you on the show tonight. Our top story tonight comes from Pakistan. The country's outgoing army chief is caught in a web of his own lies and there is no escaping. And he is lying about the 1971 Indo-Pakistan war. On Gravitas tonight, we ask, why is this a pattern with Pakistan? Is the outgoing Pakistan army chief lying to stay relevant? Or is he trying to set the narrative? Also on the show for you tonight, the Taliban Air Force is gearing up for takeoff, but where is the money even coming from? Mounting anger in China against the COVID-19 curves, protests on the ground are no longer rare. We ask, is this China's next Tiananmen moment? The UK wants to limit the use of Chinese CCTV cameras. Why is that? Over security concerns. Is it even possible to replace these cameras? It is called the Festival of Sales, but is there any reason to celebrate this Black Friday amid the looming clouds of inflation? And how can you save yourself from fake discounts? We discuss. Our cover story tonight is about Qamar Javed Bajwa, Pakistan's outgoing Chief of Army Staff. He is set to retire on the 29th of November, with just 4 days left for his term to end. He seems to be worried about his future, whether he will be able to stay relevant or whether he will be sidelined into obscurity. So what does Bajwa do to fix that dilemma? He tries to trumpet his own achievements and that of his predecessors with made-up facts. Consider what he said recently. On Wednesday, during a Defence Day speech, Bajwa tried exercising the ghost of 1971. That's the year when the Pakistan Army fought a war with India and suffered a humiliating defeat. But Bajwa says he doesn't agree. He says the army did not lose. The country's politicians did. Let me quote from his statement. I want to correct some facts here. Firstly, former East Pakistan was a political failure and not a military one. A false narrative was created from which an escape is now being attempted. I repeat, it was a political failure, he says, not a military one. But how exactly? Last we checked, it was the army that fought the war, not the country's politicians. It was the army that ruled East Pakistan under martial law. Politicians only rubber-stamped its policies, and it was the army that signed the instrument of surrender. The politicians followed their command. And that's not even the worst part. What Bajwa said further is even worse. He distorted the number of Pakistani soldiers who surrendered in the 1971 war. He said the number of soldiers who fought the war was 34,000 and not 92,000. From where did he even get this number? That he did not say. Listen to this first, and then we bust the other lies.
लड़ने वाले फौजों की तादाद 92,000 नहीं सिर्फ 34,000 थी. बाकी लोग मुख्तलिफ गवर्नमेंट के डिपार्टमेंट्स में थे और इन 34,000 लोगों का मुकाबला 2.5 लाख इंडियन आर्मी, 2 लाख ट्रेंड मुक्ति बैनी अगेंस्ट दीज हैवी ऑड्स हमारी फौज बहुत बहादुरी से लड़ी और बेमिसाल कुर्बानियां पेश की.
And now we know the Pakistan army lives in an alternative reality, but it seems that even the army's memory has transcended into a spectacular delusion. And we cannot blame them, given how the generals have hijacked the country's history books. In any case, we would like Bajwa to have a look at this report. It's from the same Western world Pakistan considers itself to be a darling of. This report was published in 1974 by the New York Times. Let me quote some of the most telling excerpts. India released the last groups of Pakistani prisoners of war today, completing the return of 93,000 Pakistanis who we held in India for over 2 years. More than 76,000 soldiers and 16,000 civilians were held in Indian camps until India and Bangladesh agreed to their release last September. And why just the Western media? Even Pakistan's own postal stamps bust Bajwa's lies. And 2 of them are on your screen. Pakistan released them as a vilification campaign against India. Read the number on both the stamps. 90,000 prisoners of war. Can Bajwa deny these stamps as well? Would he call them fake? And perhaps a political failure, not a military one. Pakistan fudged the numbers. It said 90,000 prisoners of war, not 93,000. 5 decades on, that number seems to have reduced to 34,000. We won't be surprised if they next go on to claim that they won the war. My point here is quite simple. The 1971 war was both a political and a military failure for Pakistan. The country overestimated its own capabilities and underestimated India's military might. It not only ended up losing, but also divided. East Pakistan went on to become Bangladesh. Today, it could not care less what its former rulers have to say. In any case, Bajwa's remarks triggered a meme fest online. People are mocking him for fudging facts and trying to misrepresent history. And these people are not just from India. A majority of them happen to be from Pakistan itself. Have a look at this tweet. It's from a former Pakistani soldier. Read carefully what he's written. Bajwa's latest and hopefully last speech was made in panic mode after his failed Bajwa doctrine, failed regime change operation, and he was actively attempting to divert attention from his billions of rupees of corruption. And this was just one reaction. There are many more, but you get the point here. The people of Pakistan themselves have lost faith in Qamar Javed Bajwa. That is assuming they ever had any faith. The criticism he is facing only proves this. The question, what was he thinking? What were his intentions behind making such a statement, behind lying? What motivated him? Like I said, an easy answer is his future. He will soon be out of power, and he fears he might lose relevance. Also, by calling the 1971 war a political failure, he seems to have tried disassociating himself from the collective failures of the Pakistani state under his tenure as army chief. He probably used the 1971 war as an excuse. You see, Bajwa is going down as one of the most reviled army chiefs in Pakistan. His tenure was one of the worst eras of military interventions, with a string of accusations of human rights violations carried out at the behest of Bajwa. Plus, another issue that causes anger among the Pakistani people are charges of corruption against Bajwa's immediate family. They amassed billions in wealth with their patriarch in power. They made investments in the oil business and real estate and transferred illicit revenues overseas. Simply put, Bajwa should be a worried man once he retires. It does not take time for dynamics in Pakistan to change. His track record could be exploited for political gains. So what he is trying to do by making such statements, by lying, is earn the loyalties of the generals he worked with, praise their efforts and history, ridicule the country's politics, shield himself from unwarranted cases. But will his plan work? Will his efforts bear fruit? We shall find out soon enough. And while Pakistan's establishment is caught up in defending itself from corruption, the people of the country continue to suffer. It's no secret that Pakistan's economy is in dire straits. Citizens there are dealing with rising inflation and unemployment. International debt is mounting, and the risk of a Sri Lanka-like financial meltdown looms large. Our next report gets you the details and the numbers.
Pakistan is dreading the 5th of December. The government needs to pay back a $1 billion loan. Will it be able to do that? Not many want to risk guaranteeing that Pakistan will honor its commitments. Here's why. Pakistan's total debts and liabilities rose by about 24% in the first fiscal quarter. This is due to an IMF loan and the devaluation of the Pakistani rupee. The loan was needed after devastating floods hit Pakistan this year. As for the currency, finance major Nomura has said Pakistan could face a currency crisis. At current rates, Pakistan's debt and liabilities are worth over $278 billion. Reports say it will struggle to repay even $1 billion next month. And along with this, there's a drop in foreign direct investment. FDI declined by almost 52% in the first 4 months of the financial year. Pakistan's allies, like China, are also unsure about investing in the country. Earlier this year, Beijing threatened to stop funding the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. This was over unpaid dues to a Chinese power company operating in Pakistan. Reports say Pakistan faces a financial crisis. So what happens if Pakistan defaults on its loans? If it can't pay back its lenders? If foreign funding dries up? Well, you saw what happened in Sri Lanka. Economic collapse, the inability to import essentials, fuel shortages, long lines for basic goods, sky-high inflation, a crash in the currency's value. How is the country doing economically? Let's look at the figures. According to the IMF's latest figures, the GDP is expected to grow around 6% this year. But things start looking bleak from 2023 onwards. The GDP may grow just 3.5%. That's the worst after Sri Lanka, without counting Afghanistan. What about inflation? Pakistan had the worst rate of inflation last year. From 2024, it's expected to have the worst rate in the region again. This is despite Sri Lanka's meltdown. And look at the figures, almost 20% inflation in 2023. The employment data presents a grim picture too. The unemployment rate spiked even before the COVID-19 pandemic began. It isn't expected to return to the 2018 levels till 2026. And remember, this is a percentage of the population. Pakistan's working-age population will keep growing. Millions more will be without jobs in the years to come. Joblessness, high prices, slow and uneven economic growth, and that's the best-case scenario. If Pakistan defaults on its sovereign debt, it'll be a calamity.
Let's talk about what's happening in Afghanistan now. The Taliban have an air force. Let that sink in. And that air force has now been cleared for takeoff. Look at these visuals. They are from Afghanistan. You see those planes and choppers? That's the Afghan Air Force. It's called the Islamic Emirate Air Force. IEAF, that's the official name. The Taliban recently bragged about this. It said, "We did not have a single operational aircraft when we came to power. Over 70 destroyed planes and helicopters have been repaired." Now, you can take that number with a pinch of salt, but even if the Taliban have a fleet half that size, it adds up to a great cause of concern for many. And the biggest question here is, who even repaired these aircraft? Quick history. When the American forces fled Afghanistan in August 2021, they left behind several choppers and planes, at least 70 of them. But these aircraft were not functional because the American troops destroyed the machines before fleeing. When the Taliban entered Kabul, videos and pictures emerged showing armed men posing with these helicopters and planes. The visuals were chilling and the threat was real because the Taliban now had attack planes at their disposal, the likes of A-29 attack planes. Even if they may not be functional immediately, the West ruled out the threat. Speaking about A-29s in particular, the US Commander of Air Combat Command, Mark Kelly, said, "When you look at the airplane's range and speed and computer power and lifting capability, it's not something that frankly concerns us." But what about the security of the immediate neighborhood? Safe to say that rarely bothers the West. Some Western experts even suggested that the Taliban could seek to sell the aircraft. Clearly, the Taliban had other plans. Planes are being freshly painted and flaunted. They are ready to take off. But the big question is, how did this even happen? Who helped the Taliban repair the sophisticated planes? Who helped the Taliban put these aircraft back in shape? It will be wrong to say that the Taliban have no experience when it comes to flying, because they do. The Taliban have used Mi 8x7 helicopters in the past, soon after its emergence in Kandahar. It also got its hand on MiG-21s. But the machines that America left behind are not the same. Like the Black Hawks. How did the Taliban have the expertise to repair them? Remember, a Black Hawk crashed when US SEALs descended upon a compound in Pakistan's Abbottabad to capture the world's most wanted terrorist, Osama bin Laden. Instead of repairing the chopper, the SEALs decided to destroy the chopper. Here, Afghan forces seem to be hinting that their engineers managed to repair the complicated machines. In August this year, the Taliban released a statement. They said they recently repaired 35 tanks, 15 Humvee armored vehicles, and 20 US-produced Navy Star 7000 military vehicles. But an American aircraft is surely more complicated than its Humvee. And for that matter, even the aircraft Taliban seized from the Afghan Air Force, the likes of C-30 cargo planes, A-29 attack planes, are more complicated than a Humvee. So who repaired them for the Taliban is the immediate question once again. Previously, the Taliban had said that pilots and other experts from the former Afghan National Army would be roped into Afghanistan's security force. Even if that did happen, they alone could not have done the job, could they? Take the A-29. It's a turboprop attack plane. It's built by the Brazilian aerospace manufacturer Embraer. The airline is modified by Sierra Nevada, which happens to be an American defense firm. And like I've been saying repeatedly, these are complicated machines. And the Taliban are not trained to fly these aircraft. But reports say at least 6 Black Hawks have been put in service. So have 10 MD-530Fs. Not only have the Taliban been able to get them airborne, but also take care of the logistics. You see, flying these aircraft requires both skill and money, and a lot of money. Every time a chopper or plane is airborne, you need to service it, both before and after that flight. You need to take care of the repair work. You need to have spare parts, enough spare parts. But the Taliban did not have enough money to feed the people on the ground, let alone foot the bill for maintaining these machines. Surely it has received external help. The question I'm asking is, who did the help come from? Who is helping the Taliban? Which country is weaponizing this deadly group? In July this year, a Taliban commander was seen using a helicopter to take his newlywed bride home. The commander supposedly flew the young bride from Logar to Khost province. And then in August, roars were heard over the capital Kabul. Some aircraft were being tested. What type am I talking about? The Taliban did not get into specifics. All types, quote unquote, is what the spokesperson said. In September, the Taliban was seen test flying an American Black Hawk helicopter in Kabul, but the chopper crashed and 3 people lost their lives. But this is not a case on the safety of these once defunct machines. It is a case on arming the Taliban. The US served a fleet on platter, and some country helped the Taliban hop on the pilot's seat and start the training sorties. And the next and very obvious question is, now that the Taliban have an air force, what does it plan to do with it? The Taliban have reportedly been flying the aircraft for transporting personnel and cargo. Some reports say the Taliban's Air Force have taken in some exercise. I wonder what kind. So far, there have been no reports of these planes and choppers trespassing neighboring airspaces. But how long before that happens? And if and when that happens, who will the world hold accountable? You remember that iconic video? It is from Beijing's Tiananmen Square. The year was 1989, and the Chinese Communist Party was facing one of its biggest tests. There were unprecedented protests. Millions of people had gathered in Beijing to call for greater freedom of speech, less censorship, and democratic reforms. The country's youngest were standing up to the Chinese, to the most powerful in the country. Today, this man is remembered as the emblem of that very resistance that China quashed with force and armed personnel. This man decided to stand up to military tanks with nothing but 2 shopping bags. Decades later, there is fresh resistance in China, and there is a new tank man. We don't know his name yet, but we can tell you this. This man is from the city of Chongqing. He has given voice to the building frustration over China's zero COVID measures. He has called on the government of the leader, Xi Jinping, to admit its mistakes with regard to the handling of the COVID-19 crisis. One of his speeches is going viral on social media. In that, he is heard telling a group of locals, "Give me liberty or death." He goes on to say there is only one disease in the world, and this is being poor and not having freedom. We have both. We are still struggling and suffering over a little cold. For the first time since Tiananmen, words like freedom are being openly used in mainland China. Goes without saying, the man was taken away by the police. The onlookers protested. They were angry. On Chinese social media, this man is being hailed as Superman brother. Some are calling him Chongqing hero. The police censored these hashtags. Mentions of this man are being scrubbed off the internet. China's new tank man has become a symbol of the unprecedented dissent that is plaguing China. We have been showing you what's happening in Zhengzhou. The city is home to the world's biggest iPhone factory. There have been violent clashes in this iPhone city, as it's called. Factory workers are protesting against the COVID-19 restrictions. They have clashed with public officials, smashed windows, surveillance cameras, knocked down furniture, even sworn at the police. It all began with factory workers demanding bonus and better working conditions, and this has escalated to a mass uprising, an organic uprising. Earlier today, fresh rallies emerged. It looked like a build-up very similar to Tiananmen 1989. This display of dissent is not limited to this city. People across China are unhappy with the country's handling of the pandemic. And why should they not be? You see, the world is learning to live with this virus. But China is obsessing with its president's signature zero COVID policy. The Chinese border remains all but closed. The country continues to enforce localized lockdown measures, mandate mass testing, and impose travel restrictions. The visuals coming in from the World Cup in Qatar have been an eye-opener for many in China. They are contrasting the images of the maskless fans in Qatar to lockdown citizens of China. Look at the country's capital city, Beijing. It looks abandoned. Many of its residents have been asked to stay at home. Museums, parks, restaurants have been shut. The people are suffering.
It's not a question of whether we say it or not. It's a question of what kind of problem exists now. And we all understand that this has affected the lives of the citizens. Our lives are not just about buying groceries, going for a meal. We need to do other things. Think about what it used to be like during the prosperous past.
But is the Chinese government even listening? In one social media video, residents in the manufacturing hub of Guangzhou were seen dismantling the barricades there and throwing things at the police. The cops were heard shouting, "What are you doing?" Clearly, China is not familiar with protests. And what's happening is rare. What's happening is justified at the same time. People are frustrated. They are desperate. People are angry. They have realized that despite the draconian approach, China has failed to curb COVID-19. Even 3 years after the outbreak in Wuhan, China is still struggling to fight the virus. The country is reporting record high cases. On Thursday, nearly 33,000 fresh infections were reported, which is the highest for China since the outbreak in Wuhan in 2019. Clearly, the lockdowns are not working, and yet they are being enforced. For example, if you are living in Beijing, then you would need a negative RT-PCR test to enter public spaces. Schools across the city have moved online. This is what today's China looks like. And this is the result of Xi Jinping's making. It is his government that clung on to the zero COVID strategy. It is his government that picked lockdown over vaccination, that refused to import vaccines even when Chinese vaccines were clearly not doing a good job. It is Xi Jinping's government that prioritized mass lockdowns over mass vaccination. The people of China are now asking the government to admit its failure, accept responsibility, undo the wrong. The question again is, will Beijing listen? Or will it once again use force to quash dissent? And speaking of dissent, here's what's happening at Amazon. The American e-commerce giant is making headlines. Last month, it joined the Silicon Valley in laying off its employees. Reports say it is aiming to eliminate about 10,000 jobs, mostly in retail, devices, human resources. Last we checked, the process of axing jobs was yet to begin. But even before that, another challenge has emerged for this company. Large-scale protests against its work environment. These protesters are part of a movement that's called Make Amazon Pay, quote-unquote. The protesters belong to 80 trade unions, environment action groups, other employee welfare organizations. We will tell you what they are demanding. Let's first take a look at where the protests are taking place. They are taking place in nearly 35 countries, including France, Germany, the US, Ireland, India, South Africa, just to name a few. The next question is, what do these protesters want? A better pay, a better work environment, and more rights. They say they are overworked, underpaid, and have had enough. Let's listen to some voices.
We have 35 countries in the world asking the same thing as us, because Amazon is a global company and we all have the same working conditions and the same level of remuneration, which is at the lowest of what countries are allowed to pay. We are all in the same mess, so we're all asking the same thing, for salary increases and working conditions worthy of the 21st century.
We're stating our demands in relation to the pressure we're under within Amazon. And that's why we're asking for a salary increase, because we're poorly paid compared to the work we do. We're always asked to meet quotas, and under pressure, people fall sick, are on sick leave, have a work-related accident.
The timing of these protests is interesting. They come right after Amazon reported a rise in revenues. It reported a stellar 13% rise in Q3, and this is across all countries that it operates in. Let's look at the case of one of them, the UK. This year, Amazon services in the UK reported a 60% surge in profits. They soared to a whopping £204 million. And this only suggests that Amazon's market domination is increasing. So naturally, Amazon employees want a piece of the pie. They want their employer to hike the salaries, especially those doing warehouse jobs. They are demanding a wage rise to cope with the cost of living crisis, which has hit their household budgets. Specific wage demands differ from country to country. They vary depending on the kind of the workers and where they are in the scheme of things. But all these workers are united in Amazon's absolute silence on their demands. It is blaming its employees for having ulterior motives. Let me quote a statement from an Amazon spokesperson. These groups represent a variety of interests, and while we are not perfect in any area, if you objectively look at what Amazon is doing on these important matters, you will see that we do take our role and our impact very seriously. Here's the thing now. We have seen similar protests in the past, not just by Amazon employees, but from a host of companies. A common thread that runs through these protests is the employer's denial about the concerns of the employees. Their attempts at discrediting protests as manufactured, their policy of putting profit over welfare. And this seems to have become a commonplace in the corporate world. Companies the world over tend to overlook employee well-being, and you cannot blame them for this. We are living in the era of Jack Ma and Elon Musk. Corporate bosses who prioritize stakeholder management over shareholder management. The recent takeovers, the growing layoffs, the refusal to hike wages, they all reek of extreme capitalism. My point is simple. Employees make the company. They are your number one asset, your biggest resource, your brand ambassadors. They can make or break your business. And this goes for every industry. Whether a retail store or an online business, the rules of leadership apply everywhere. The scale of protests by Amazon employees only proves that the company did not really follow these steps. Let's now shift focus to the UK. Fearing a threat to its national security, the UK government has now prohibited the use of Chinese visual surveillance systems in its buildings. The government has also cited the human rights abuse in China's Xinjiang region as the reason behind this decision. Let's break it down for you bit by bit. On Thursday, a UK lawmaker, Oliver Dowden, told the Parliament, and I'm quoting, "In light of the threat to the UK and the increasing capability and connectivity of these systems, additional controls are required. Departments have therefore been instructed to cease deployment of such equipment to sensitive sites where it is produced by companies subject to the national intelligence law of the People's Republic of China." In other words, the British government is moving more forcefully against China, and the Chinese companies, overall for security reasons. The government's new order stops short of an outright ban on the China-based companies, but it discouraged the use of CCTVs made by firms that require them to share intelligence with Beijing security services. In fact, the order makes it clear that no such cameras should be connected to core networks at government departments. The UK government has asked ministries to replace the gears instead of waiting for scheduled upgrades. But the big question here is, can the UK even do this? Can it replace Chinese CCTVs? Does the country have a supplier with the capacity to replace all the Chinese surveillance cameras? Replacing Chinese gear could prove to be a meticulous task for the UK government because according to Big Brother Watch, a non-profit organization, the majority of public bodies use CCTV cameras made by Hikvision or Dahua, the two partly state-owned Chinese firms. This list includes 73% of councils across the UK, 57% of secondary schools in England, 6 out of 10 National Health Service trusts, as well as UK universities, even the police forces. In response to lawmaker Dowden's statement, Hikvision spokesman said it was categorically false to represent the company as a threat to national security. In fact, he claimed Hikvision cannot transmit data from end users to third parties and that the company does not manage end user databases or sell cloud storage in the UK. Hikvision further stated that the company officials have been engaging with the UK government to clarify misunderstandings. China was also quick to respond to the UK government's move. The Xi Jinping government said that it would defend the legitimate rights and interests of the Chinese companies.
The Chinese government always encourages Chinese companies to carry out foreign trade and investment cooperation on the basis of complying with local laws as well as market principles and international rules. We strongly oppose to some people's move in overstretching the concept of national security to restrict Chinese enterprises. We will keep a close eye on how things develop. The Chinese government will firmly defend Chinese businesses' legitimate and lawful rights and interests.
The British directive came months after dozens of UK lawmakers called for a ban on the sale and use of security cameras made by Hikvision and Dahua. The lawmakers cited fears of privacy breach and concerns of the companies being involved in enabling human rights abuses against the Uyghur minority in Xinjiang. Let's take you back to 2019. The US placed Hikvision and other Chinese companies on a trade blacklist. In fact, America prohibited them from importing US technology over similar allegations. Let's now shift gears and talk about cars. As the automobile technology keeps improving, cars should be getting faster, right? Well, not exactly. For a while now, companies have been using technology to artificially limit their cars. And they are putting features behind a paywall. You heard that right, a paywall. Case in point, Mercedes-Benz is adopting this trend as well. The German car giant has a range of electric cars. It's the EQ series that we are talking about. It has been revealing new models every year. The latest is the EQE SUV. It was unveiled on the 16th of October. However, prospective buyers may be in for a surprise. To unlock the peak performance mode for this and 3 other cars in the series, they will have to shell out $1,200 annually plus taxes. $1,200. This is the car manufacturer's US website. It says the acceleration increase feature is coming soon. If you go through the website, you see what's on offer. Both acceleration and performance get boosted for a price. Of course, Mercedes-Benz is not the first car company to paywall its features. Tesla did this long ago with this ludicrous mode. Customers had to pay $10,000 to enable the feature. But it wasn't just about making a payment and getting new software. Some additional hardware components were involved as well. It was the same with the Plaid mode Tesla came out with the plan that Tesla came out with in 2021. Plaid-enabled Model S and Model X cars were given an additional motor. Mercedes has not mentioned that. The acceleration increase feature seems to be software only, and it raises some serious questions. Should car makers be able to withhold features? Should they be allowed to charge subscription fees for the existing ones? Remember, the hardware is already present in your car. The companies just aren't letting you use it. They are remotely limiting your car's performance. In fact, BMW did something similar. In July, they were widely criticized over seat warming subscriptions. You heard that right. People were being charged $18 a month to heat up their car seats. And just think about what this means. Your car is already equipped with a seat warmer. The heating device is right there, but you cannot use it. BMW is using software to stop the warmer from working. You have to conduct a monthly microtransaction to warm yourself up. And it's not just the German firms. Toyota wanted money to let the customers start their cars with a remote key. In fact, one of the models, Cadillac, charges a monthly fee for its hands-free mode, Super Cruise. In 2021, General Motors said it earned $2 billion in subscription fees. This was for security, emergency services, and navigation features. GM had said it expects the subscription to generate $25 billion by 2030. Those are subscription revenues you might expect from a Netflix or Spotify. Again, we should highlight a difference here. Some subscriptions are for features that cost companies money. Navigation services, for example, the software needs to be updated. It's a cost to the company. But the BMW seat warming was a hardware limiting issue. And Tesla does something similar too. It limits its electric vehicle batteries. You can buy a battery pack with your Tesla, and this will unlock the battery's full capacity, or you will be stuck charging your car more frequently. Even as microtransactions are becoming increasingly common, automobile firms have faced pushback over this. BMW rolled back a subscription scheme to access Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. These features were available in other cars for free. BMW customers were not amused. So what can we expect going forward? Will car companies listen to this call for moderation? Will they curb their worst impulses? Let's face it, that is unlikely. As automobile prices continue to rise and sales decline, car makers are going to look at alternate income streams. Subscriptions are a potential gold mine for them. You will be paying car makers for years, not just the one time you buy your car, and sometimes it may even make sense. Regular software updates may appeal to some customers. But when car firms limit hardware performance, remotely stop you from using something you already own, then the question arises, who is really in the driver's seat? And this is no ordinary Friday that we are looking at. It is Black Friday. For those of you who might not be aware, Black Friday is synonymous with shopping sprees. It means attractive discounts and deals. The idea has gradually spread from the United States. Festival shopping begins around the time of Black Friday in the US. It falls a day after the US holiday of Thanksgiving. Shoppers begin their Christmas shopping during this period, and Black Friday is described as the biggest shopping day in America. It is a festival of sales. But it's not exactly an ordinary Black Friday this year. Far from it. It's a gloomy one, to say the least, thanks to the dark clouds of inflation looming over. According to some reports, in fact, over half, that's 51% Americans will pull back on spending this Black Friday as compared to last year. But why? In one word, inflation. They rather spend their money to cover their day-to-day expenses, the immediate concerns, save money for emergencies, pay for the energy bills, save gas, save money for the gas for their vehicles. Things are looking bleak for the world's biggest economy. Soaring inflation has left a cloud of uncertainty hanging over the shopping season. Let's rewind a bit here. The COVID-19 pandemic triggered factory closures. There were product shortfalls, shipping backlogs. At this point in time, now that the world has largely opened up, the industry is looking at ways to not let the shopping spirit be dampened this time around as well. Holiday imports are up, which could mean oversupplies in some parts as well, especially at a time when there is uncertainty over whether consumers would even want to open their pockets and spend. And this is at a time when the savings cushion appears to be shrinking. According to Moody's, after $2.5 trillion in excess savings in mid-2021, the benchmark fell to $1.7 trillion in the second quarter. The National Retail Federation is the largest retail trade group. It expects holiday sales growth will slow to a range of 6 to 8%. And this is compared to the 13.5% growth of a year ago. But why is the slump in Black Friday sales even important? The Black Friday weekend serves as an important indicator of the mood on the ground to gauge the willingness of the shoppers to spend. The 2-month period between Thanksgiving and Christmas represents about 20% of the retail industry's annual sales. But here's the twist, rather a warning. Do not be fooled by the discounts that you see. According to consumer group Which, analysis of more than 200 offers last Black Friday revealed something that you as a shopper must pay attention to. It found 98% were cheaper or the same price at other times in the year. And the consumer group is telling consumers Black Friday is rarely the cheapest time to shop. Out of the deals that were analyzed, the consumer group found 183 or 86% were cheaper or the same as their Black Friday price in the 6 months before the sales event. In fact, Amazon, according to this consumer group, has been named as the worst retailer overall for dubious discounts, quote unquote. Let's face it, discounts are supremely attractive. There is no denying that. A discount tag is tempting. But first things first, look at the price, not the savings. Research about the product and its price history. Ensure that the sellers are genuine. Make a list of different retailers selling the same product. And goes without saying, money in your account is among the most important factors. So prioritize and shop wisely. Time now to tell you what else is making news around the world. This is Gravitas Global Headlines.
Nearly half of Kyiv's residents still without electricity as engineers battle to restore services 2 days after Russian strikes hammered the country's energy grid. U.S. writer who accused Donald Trump of raping her in the mid-1990s files an upgraded lawsuit under new law that protects survivors of sexual assault decades after attacks may have occurred. A Hong Kong court imposes a fine on 90-year-old Cardinal Zen and 5 others after convicting them for failing to register a now-defunct fund, which was aimed at helping people arrested in protests 3 years ago. Honduras declares emergency amid rising cases of extortion by violent criminal groups. New measures would include suspension of some constitutional rights and deployment of 20,000 police agents. U.S. top automaker Ford is recalling more than 600,000 sport utility vehicles worldwide over fire risks from possible cracked fuel injectors. France's lower house of parliament adopts a bill to make abortion a constitutional right, the first step in a legislative battle prompted by rollback of abortion rights in the US. South Sudan's government withdraws from peace negotiations with rebel groups, accusing them of using the talks to buy time as they prepare for war. Over 600 young people in Sweden, including climate activist Greta Thunberg, files a lawsuit against the Swedish state, accusing it of climate inaction, a first in the country. Iran scored 2 goals in stoppage time to claim a stunning 2-0 victory over 10-men Wales at the FIFA World Cup. The Asian powerhouses scored twice after Wales were reduced to 10 men to keep their hopes alive of reaching the last 16. Brazil forward Neymar is set to miss the remaining group stage matches with a ligament damage in the ankle. The 30-year-old is, however, expected to return for the knockout stage.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas, leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks very much for watching.